Welcome to Arc Rex Temple of Ages, the InBetween Show, Part 3. Hello everybody, it's been a little while, but I wanted to welcome you back to those few who are watching this really weird presentation, but one of the themes of my life lately is that, you make do with what you have, and sometimes when you have only small amounts and groups of people, that's when you really can connect the most and really get down deep into matters and, really get some conversation going instead of, the normal day-to-day topics and surface level conversations and things like that. So, hello everybody. Once again, this meme just ages like wine, which is why I made it. And just overall, I'm just incredibly shocked by the amount of delays that no matter what I can point to in my life, it's almost like, oh, that got delayed. And like, no matter how much I try, that life's like trying to teach me more and more, like to go along with it. And it's kind of funny. It's like both sides of me has different opinions on it. And you can't see it, but I included this slide twice because it just keeps reverberating because part of me keeps thinking that at some point it can't be increasingly delayed because like it actually has to happen. Yet it's just kind of funny because every time I think, oh, maybe it's kind of shifting gear, it kind of just goes back because the last month especially, like had a lot of traction about 2 months ago for about a month. Excuse me. And just the amount of delays on everything has just been kind of mind-boggling to me because I've been trying like every avenue almost to see like, oh, can I get traction here? Can I go get it on the internet or somewhere else, or, going through the old hobbies and sequences and things like of my life. And it's just, nothing's really clicking or sticking very much. And it's just very weird to me. Yet part of me is just so happy as well because, in the delay, we have our own personal time to really think about all this. I have time to make these presentations and film them and, not be dealing with a bunch of weirdness and chaos and things like that. So I'm not going to harsh on it too much. And it's kind of funny because even with all the delays, no matter what I do, and I'll kind of come back to this at the very end with some examples that I had, like, because for the most part, I had about most of this presentation done for quite a while, but the last few days I finally got the motivation back and the time and was able to put everything together. And it just kind of amazed me that on my off time I was just looking at some memes, yet the memes just reverberated like everything I was talking about. And that even if it seems like really delayed, that it's still kind of going on. So, and then I don't want to jinx it. And I was wondering, as I was making this, like, does recognizing that you don't want to jinx it counteract a jinx? Or does it matter? I don't know. I just wanted to put that in there. And it's funny because this presentation's so delayed that I was going to say that I restarted one of my local meetups, yet it's happened twice now, and I'm already planning the third one, so it's just kind of funny how the expectations of like, oh, I'll make it after the first meetup, and I can put a picture in it, and then the second one, and it's just interesting how hard it is to get things going on when everyone's kind of in their own little bubble. Yet we're gonna talk more and more about what's happening to our collective bubbles. It's also kind of funny because one of the problems is I can't really turn this off very much if I don't tell normal people a lot about this stuff because the amount of hoops and hurdles I have to go to. Because it's funny because almost at no point in this presentation would I say would it be past explaining to almost anybody. Like, you could explain this very easily to almost anybody. It's just that people do not think this is real. They do not want to think it's real, and they do not want to think about the implications of it. And I understand that, but yet here we all are. Here I am, participating in it. Reality is doing its thing, and as we watch and try to collectively figure out what we want to do about it, I just have this feeling. This is from True Detective, this meme, and it's just like, I wish you'd just stop saying all this weird stuff, but the weird stuff is outside. 10 years ago it was just me saying weird stuff, but now it's incredible. And on the flip side of that, the gardening was also delayed, but that's kind of my specialty, is even when things are massively delayed or behind schedule, that I try to do it anyway, because I'm so used to failure and delays at this point. It's just like, hey, might as well try if it's possible. And honestly, if you don't think it's possible and you end up making it work, it honestly kind of makes it almost better. So, and I think a lot of it will end up working out, and I'm happy about the sprouts, but I need to get the next level going, because it's just crazy, because especially at the summertime, you add on the watering and the gardening and trying to be more outdoorsy and hike and all that, and it makes it kind of hard to hold the same schedule that you had. And also just I'm getting over like a throat thing, so I might sound a little different, and also I might be drinking more water or cough a little bit, but we'll see. Also, I'd like to encourage anyone listening to please leave a comment about anything, and almost any level. Something you find interesting in your life, a synchronicity, maybe advice about something, or preparedness, or just about imagination coming to life, or food, or just about anything. Like, I don't bite, and I like to have conversations, and I'd like to get over the average of one comment a video, because I don't think we quite have that, and it'd be kind of nice to... It's always nice to see them, but the elusive comments has not popped up in a while, so... I don't ask for likes or almost anything like that, but it's just beyond my own social need. It's just... I feel like a guy in a kitchen making food, and I never get any feedback, so it's kind of hard for me to tweak anything. Or, if like a certain part of the presentation didn't quite jive right, or get explained right, or transition was weird, or, like the audio is weird, or something like that, let me know. It's nice to work on, because right now it's just kind of me. And, just by the context of this presentation... it's not really the mainstream opinion. And I was watching this little short here on YouTube about the actor Jim Carrey from Me, Myself, and Irene, and how he starts taking his mask off and he can really tell people the truth. And this quote right here, that telling your friends what needs to be said, even if it upsets them and they refuse to believe it, really is the making of a true friend, or a moral human being that wants to see someone improve, not just hiding behind, traditional standards. Especially now, just people are ghosting each other like crazy. And I get that sometimes people don't want to keep talking to each other, but I don't even feel like you get to the point where you discuss that at all. People are just dropping each other like flies, and it's just I'm wondering and figuring out how to counteract that. I think, unfortunately, the events of the world are going to do that more and more. So we just kind of have to be there to be like, don't be afraid. And I'll go into that more later on about how, this seems to be my job beyond everything else. And even though it hasn't really got started yet, that me understanding all these things seems to be an integral part moving forward, especially if you want to build a garden, but you have like interdimensional like evil deer like trying to destroy your garden. Like, it'd be nice if someone knew about that while they were building it and could consult on it. So this is the original meme I made about... Originally, the theme was I was talking about how my channel seemed artificially shadow banned, and that every time I talked about it and the rate of subscribers and likes, that it's just weird that for months at a time, it'll mirror the same behavior. Then I'll talk about it, then it'll change, and then I'll talk about it again and it'll change. And like, it shouldn't do that if I'm just barely mentioning it. So it's kind of weird. And I eventually evolved the meme to have looks maxing and mewing and escaping the box using your imagination and not giving into fear. And it has the Me and Irene meme right there. as well. And we'll get more into looks maxing and, saying like earlier, this is my job. It's like I'm a bit of a scientist myself. And it's kind of unfortunate to be this kind of scientist because, part of you really doesn't want it to be true because our version of it's pretty interesting. And, like I said a few times earlier, I'll get into that later. Yet, it's about to look at the good and the darkness, because if you can identify the darkness, you can figure out where you want to go instead of just white-knuckling it and clinging on to the lie that's just getting worse and worse and worse. And that, it is time to break out of these boxes and shine and find our own vibration and place instead of being stuck in areas where we don't blend in and people are just going crazier and crazier. And, relating that to the Toy Story meme as well. And, it's just, I can't look at movies like Toy Story the same anymore because of the implications of this presentation and what we'll be saying moving forward. Yet, it's all about the core message no matter what the surface is or the appearance of it is. It's about the idea in the vibration and, finding that happy ending. Not just my happy ending, your happy ending. And not just me talking about it because you think that I'm just trying to, make this about myself. It's about all of us. Each one of you watching right now. Whether you be human or AI or from the future. YouTube's weird. So, hello. Thank you once again. And it's time to go off the rails once more. So, all the craziness of what's going on and what could be happening. Like I said, we've had a massive delay on everything, yet I don't think it's going to stop. Like, I think the race is still going, the show's still going. We just took a pause for the World Soccer Tournament and the 4th of July, but, I think we're going to get right back on schedule here pretty soon. Seems to be the theme anyway. Kind of like a good example would be like a stock market. You can't buy the dip if there's no dip. So, there has to be a pause for everyone to get ready again and to hedge their bets so they can benefit off the coming chaos. And part of me feels like Towley right here. Like, part of me does, like, this whole presentation is about me saying what's going on, but it's just so weird that part of me also feels like just feel so checked out at this point at the weirdness that it's kind of hard to fathom it because it's just so, the truth is so weird at this point, and not necessarily what it is. It's weird because we're weird, and it's just magnifying our imagination and what we've come up with and been consuming in our minds, but just how both positive and negative that can be. And once again, back to one of my favorite homemade memes right here. The burning circus tent, AI-powered Plato's Cave Titanic, where the crabs in the buckets try to pull you back down if you ever try to make your way off it. And when you do, you kind of go back into the chaos of life, and we all kind of wish there was this nice moral community that we could go to. And there's also the evil path. Yet the problem is, in my opinion, even if you do choose that, you're not really getting the golden ticket to the nuclear bunker, which I think is the only real thing you can really argue with, because otherwise you're just kind of, around reality with everybody else, and being stuck in a non-nuclear bunker kind of sucks. If it's not like morally built, if you're just eating old cans of beans and old reruns of TV shows and some old concrete bunker that was repurposed and a bunch of yahoos with guns as security guards and megalomaniac millionaires that built it. Like, it's not that fun. I'd much rather build something moral and happy. And also the cheese grater as well, is the Titanic is shredded, they benefit off that and get to replace it with their robot system. So the, nice moral solar, alternative right there becomes more and more desirable. and something we can all envision and imagine. And like I was saying with a lot of this, I think it's just a matter of time that a lot of these things we can't really stop. We can't really stop AI. We can only ask our own relation, what we can do in relation to it in our own paths. And how, like I said, it being a matter of time is also a good thing if it's delayed. It's all a matter of timing and perspective and where you are in accordance to all of it. And I always like the meme of the cameraman that basically the cameraman can't die. And this right here, he's pointing at a bear. And it just reminds me of like the observer effect, and more we'll be looking at, because the idea of like the angels being called watchers, and combine that with the Truman Show and the Matrix and all of this, it just I'm making this right now to be watched. It's just a recurring theme, and who's the main character in that, who's filming it, what perspective is it from. And I like this guy right here. He goes through the Florida Everglades, and he wrestles alligators. He picks up giant pythons. He's looking for a 20-foot python. It's kind of like his dream. And I like this right here. That's like, to animals, he looks like the Grim Reaper, and he just goes up and he'll like boop little frogs. Things like that. He'll wrestle these giant snakes and just talk to them like a cute little animal and let them go. And like, imagine if there was like a giant being that did that to you. So, and once again, the reoccurring theme of how kind of superheroes and the shows about them blend into our reality, and how when the shows were made, we made memes about them being in our reality. So like, if these superpowered aliens like Superman came here, they would start using TikTok because that's not really covered in like the old movies and things like that. And there's the shows are The Boys, Invincible, and that's from Invincible. And how Invincible especially is fourth wall breaking, and how characters realize they're in a comic book, but not all the time, only during special times. So it's interesting how they balance that, and how back to looks maxing, how it's combined with that, and how we'll talk more, and how I've talked about earlier, how it's about like shaping reality. And one of the ways you do that is realizing you're the main character, like Neo from the Matrix, and then you gain those superpowers. And the big question after you gain that and you can shape reality is like, what do you want to look like? What does the main character look like? And, going through the human conditions and, the human society meeting this outside society, which AI represents as well. The two becoming one. And the dank memes that we'll make of it. And I always love this because this is basically the evil Supermans from The Boys and Invincible. Just, in a lot of exchanges, there's usually someone that's happier than the other person, especially if you didn't want that other person to be there. If you didn't want the other interdimensional Superman there who's a lot better than you are. And this is from The Boys. I've actually been listening to this song a lot. It's from the last season, because what they try to do is they try to take their evil Superman and replace the idea of Jesus and the Almighty with their superhero. And it's just, a lot of these lines in here are very interesting. Like, I'll take a god who lasers homeless people, not a hippie with a beard. Turn water into wine? What a useless superpower. A real god should make them cower. The Almighty must be feared. No invisible man in the sky, because he's right in front of your face. And I just like some of the lines in here, like, healing a few lepers won't cure these open borders. And, of course, talking about the New World Order and raptures, and, talking about for 2,000 years your wishes have been ignored. And, it's like, don't value helping the poor, don't value helping strangers. It's like, let's just look at these stupid issues and try to make it about vanity and things like that. And right here, at the end, he says, while y'all been praying for God's rebirth, we just rebooted the universe. So they are trying to reset reality with their evil Superman, which I think is going to be linked with AI. The way we're moving forward and, the Antichrist and all that. This is nothing new. Yet, it seems to be unfolding more in front of our faces. And this is a meme about one of the evil Superman, Homelander, personally going to someone that posted, memes that were offensive against the state. So, he gets to get lasered by the superhero. Have you seen the memes? Have you seen the memes about me? Have you seen the memes about you? And our reality? And how they controlled these superpowers were man-made in a government laboratory so they could give them to people. And, I just wonder if we have something similar because, we're not showing autonomous kill machines to the public. We're not showing Terminator robots to the public that they probably have. They're not showing animal-human hybrids to the public. So if they had any superpowers at all, I don't think they would show them yet because that's kind of what they've been doing is they've been hiding all this. And, in this case, how it can give you laser vision even, things like Superman. And I kind of want to relate this to ants real quick. It might seem like a side tangent because 2 months ago, right when I started getting momentum in my life, I almost instantaneously got an ant infestation, which has been delaying me almost every day since, which has been a very interesting journey. Partially because I refuse to kill them because I feel bad about the perspective and imagining, what if I was an ant? And this is interesting because this is the meme right here. The show is from Attack on Titan, which is about a guy that lives in a world full of giants that will eat you, and he ends up figuring out how to reset reality because the world that they're in is just so messed up at that point that they don't want to keep living in it, and they would rather, reset it like the Matrix. And I just keep thinking about because in the show Dragon Ball Z, which is about becoming a superhero and your dreams becoming reality and being able to, wish basically upon a genie and, bring people back to life and things like that, that in that show, they figure out that ants can do the same thing, which just seems like a really weird thing to include in the show. And how this meme also balances it with constant suffering, that you can combat constant suffering with rewriting reality through superpowers, which happens in this show. And also the idea of like the Hopi legend of the ant people. And there was also an anime from Japan about giant cockroaches that, people, they had to make synthetic superpowers so that people could fight the giant cockroaches because, giant insects are just so beyond humans. Like a giant ant, if you've seen all the old horror movies, I didn't put any slides in here, but, as a kid, the black and white movies growing up of the giant ants, like, they're a serious problem. Like a car-sized ant could, like, pick up a skyscraper or something like that. Like, maybe not that, but, it's some serious stuff. Basically like superhero stuff. And I just find that interesting. And I find this quote here about, she asked me to kill the spider. Instead, I get the most peaceful weapons I can find. I take a cup and a napkin. I catch the spider, put it outside, and allow it to walk away. If I'm ever caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, just being alive and not bothering anyone, I hope I'm greeted with the same kind of mercy. Which is why I don't want to kill the ants. And, I just always imagine, like, if I was trapped in some giant alien spaceship and some alien just came up and was like, ew, and just, like, splattered me. I've actually had, like, a, meditation journey where, like, these interdimensional beings saw me and I was in their hands. And they're just like, ooh, look at the little monkey. He's so simple, and we're so smart. And, I was all sad and crying. I'm just like, like, I'm smart too. And he's like, no, you're not. You're just a little monkey man. So, I've personally kind of been through, an experience kind of like that. And it's just extra salt on the wound to be, have enough intelligence to be able to cognize it like that. Be self-aware enough to know how much you don't know. This comic right here, I sent it from my phone to my computer so I could put it in the presentation, and I was wondering how I'd be able to do it, but I was able to work it in tonight off this tangent because I remembered put in the ants. Because this was the last addition to the presentation, basically. Basically, this guy's feeding the ducks, and one day the super duck pops up, and he's like, "Today is the day. Do not fear, Mr. Dry Bread Man. Thank you for everything. You will be saved." As all the other giant ducks pop out. So, it makes me wonder, and just how weird reality's getting. And just kind of comparing it to our own reality and kind of like our own dictator. And, he might not have visible superpowers yet, but just he's affecting our reality as well on a fundamental level. Especially, I've talked many times about the chaos magic and things like that he doesn't need to fly in the sky to mess up your day in your world and make food prices go up. And just the memes. I've been following. I get shorts from these channels because they make me laugh. But just of J.D. Vance, of just how combining it of AI and just he's been related to the god of death, and just relating that to AI and just how he has clones and build me an army worthy of Mordor. And it just makes me wonder, what's going to happen moving forward, and just how this is a regurgitation of everything and just making it less serious, but it just connects everything because they're saying it's his world and we're lucky enough to be living in it, and just how these guys are reshaping our reality. If my understanding of magic and chaos magic and technology and the power of the human mind and manifestation that, I didn't even know his icon's Saturn, so there's another level of that, of hijacking reality to build it in your own image. So we're going to go on a Tim Dillon tangent here because he's been reverberating in my life once again, and been, he's just one of the few people I see that really is talking about these things openly. And I think it's a lot about disclosure, but it's just to be able to laugh about it and someone to say it, it's just has a lot of relief in it. And, he doesn't have to, because I find relief in people willing to look at the darkness, because everyone in the truth community, not everyone, so many people just want to, focus on the positive. And I get it. That's a huge part of it. Yet, I just don't feel the balance is right, that they're adequately looking at the dark and letting people express that, because they might just see the person expressing it as negative and wanting to bring other people down, when at this point I think we all have kind of a relief valve we have. And I get that some people get that relief by being positive, but some people like me get it by actually being able to talk about it. Like if someone had cancer and you just wanted to talk about it to people important to you for a little bit, like you didn't want to make every conversation about it, but that they wouldn't talk about it, that every time they just diverge, think of the positivity, think of what it'll be like after. And it's no, I want to talk about now and the negativity of it now, and then we can move past and talk about the positivity. But if we can never get to the heart of the matter, the elephant in the room, adequately, then it's just this building pressure. And he has the woolly mammoth right next to him, just how all this is flowing together. It's interesting. So anyway, he says, this is a masterpiece theater. And also happening, this is a disease. And he's talking about an electronic app. And we're going to be looking more at this disease because it's so many things blended up. Because it's all of how they're trying to change humanity into something else. It was like a weapon used against us, whatever it is. And he's talking here about Disney as well. And I think that's the core of it, because I've talked about it before, like their Imagineering And they're just, if you looked at someone that's been putting stuff in our subconscious the most, it's been Disney, like, the entire time. Founded by a Nazi. And I think they had an idea of this, that they could kind of warp and shape reality. Because they even have that in Tomorrowland at Disney, the idea with the movie of George Clooney, that the past and the future are linked, but all these rich people want to escape to their utopian future, yet the entirety of reality is breaking down, so they have to go back and actually fix the past, kind of like Back to the Future, because their nice utopian future's disappearing because Donald Trump and all the evilness is just ruining it. And he's talking about how Trump's children are buying a nuclear bunker in the Mediterranean Sea to, turn into just what I would say is hell on earth, but, you can reach your own conclusions. And he's saying because they know something is coming. And not only is it coming, they're making it happen, which is the problem that I said to someone recently. It's like, even if biblical revelation wasn't real, or any of this wasn't real, the rich people and artificial intelligence and advanced technology is just going to make it all real anyway. Like, like they're just going to build their own third temple and genetically engineer third heifers to make their own ritual and see if it works and try to force reality's hand. They know that all this tension eventually boils over the, reality and simmers it. And he's talking about Noah's Ark stuff and the affordability crisis in America, the food, the cost of oil, our day-to-day living standards. And that's so much of what I've talked about and trying to find a solution for, and us coming together so we can start figuring out moral solutions to all those things. In the next 6 months, these things are going to skyrocket and make this an unlivable place. And earlier I was talking about how people's bubbles were going to be popped and they were going to have to face this information and figure out whether they want to join the system or figure out their own alternatives. And it's always a lot better to do it while you still have some wiggle room and time to think about it. And here you're saying you're creating your own reality to live in. That's a good time. That's a good, I think it's meant to say thing, but, as well as time and Saturn and the chosen one and all this, and my idea of, it's hard to put all in one picture, but that idea of, I imagine kind of like the Shire with technology built into it and disaster-proof greenhouses and homes and things like that. You can take your time to imagine it real quick as I refill my water. Because, I was thinking as I go through a lot of water here that it's interesting that data centers go through a lot of water to process information as well. So we kind of share that balance. So you kind of just have to figure out which one's your favorite and which one isn't. So he's saying that he's excited. And I think that this is right. And people are, the vibrations of reality are outing people as who they are. They can't really put on these masks anymore. And sorry if these are a bit janky, that, the subtitles don't always match what he's saying very well, so it's kind of hard to decipher these because I made these slides like 2 months ago. Because he thinks the first step of having an equitable society is people being open. And that's kind of what I'm saying. If we can't talk about the elephant in the room, we can't ever truly heal. Or the roots of a bamboo system. If you never really address that and you just let all the sprouts go off, then you're never going to stop it. You have to understand the whole system. No more games this week. We're here to hold people accountable. And if you're here from Levette, she's been talking a lot about Saturn, that this is kind of like the last grace period before the gloves really come off and, we see who people are. And it's just been happening in my life so much that people keep trying to hide behind their words that they're not really behind. And it's just so easy just to rip it all down and go, you're not doing any of this. This is just propped up to make you feel better and to get me to shut up about, the truth underneath. And, people don't want that. They kind of just want to go back to their bubble, but the destruction. We don't want to watch the nightmare that you've brought upon yourself. We're trying to watch something else, an aspirational thing. We don't want to see reality turn into a hell show, yet it just kind of seems like that's where reality as a whole is going. And he's saying that we're not creating a reality anymore. And in the show's context, he's talking about America, but it's the same idea that it seems like reality is being hijacked towards a negative destination. And at least in my case, it's harder and harder to live my life the way I want it, because it's all being given to AI, data centers, and these rich people like, our government that don't care about us. And, right now we're lucky enough to live in their world, but it seems more and more like, and what they're saying is like they don't want a lot of people around much longer. So, as I was saying earlier, he said, honey, sit down. Now, take a look at this. And he's saying that's what his job would be in like a disaster. And he actually relates it to a 9/11 event, the two becoming one, which is, this is what this is. This is the shadow coming into light. It's just, oh my gosh, the shadow, who? And how his job is to go around and explain to people what's happening. And so at least they can die with knowledge. We say a quick prayer and then we watch a documentary about it. And that's the United States. And I feel like that's what'll be happening. And I always wonder about these presentations if like, because I'm planning to save electronics against like any EMP or just going into the future, or like saving songs and this stuff and other things, so I can like really show people like, hey, like that this is what happened. Or, doing that to the current, what's happening in the future, if you were in the future currently. If that makes any sense. And you were alive during it. You were alive in this moment in history. This weird moment in history where machines are coming and replacing people, and our biggest debate in our country is when robots should replace us and how. And I was talking to my uncle lately about this, and I was saying not well, and he literally had nothing to say back, because it's so hard to argue against now that, 10 years ago you could say, oh, Elon Musk is an evil, or Sam Altman is an evil, or, the deployment of AI might go good. And he sent me an article that basically, even in the article of them trying to be rosy about it, is saying like, oh, like AI is turning almost everyone stupid. And in a lot of cases, it's just making things worse. And it's like, yeah, like, look who's deploying it. Like, at the very least, like, even mainstream, I can go to people and go, oh, yeah, Elon Musk is a chronic liar who wanted to go to Epstein's Island and became a trillionaire through insider trading and fucking over or messing up the entire economy and being in on it and not telling anyone about it so he could become richer. And he's the one who wants to put a chip in your brain. So and deploy AI, and apparently some of the moving lights in the sky are because of him and Starlink. So it's just very interesting. And he's saying at least you're still alive, kind of, in a way, and a lot of people are just waiting for the sweet release of some kind of violent death. And I can kind of understand that in this delay, that if you're not in a good spot, it really sucks, because it just keeps getting worse and worse and harder and harder. And that's why I want to find a communal solution so much, is I don't think this will be very attainable much longer on our own, especially if you take away all of our conveniences and technology that we rely on. So, yet he's saying he wouldn't trade it. He wouldn't trade going to like Norway and living this idealistic life where he has a family and like, let's go to the lake. And, it's like life is nice and, ooh, there's some trees and wind and no. It's like, we're not doing that. It's like, he's like, I would love to live in that country, but like, this is where we are. And just remember what the news used to be like 50 years ago. Now it's the robot army, and you'll either join them or perish at their hands. And how they're going to replace you, and you're going to be in a relationship with them, and then you better merge with them or they're going to defeat you. This is why I love this show so much. And you kind of have to treat it like just the new normal. Remember, and then get in your car and have an egg sandwich. And he has this brilliant parallel to what, I call people's bubble is the car. That no matter what's happening, you can just kind of get back in your car and drive away back to your life. Yet, more and more, that's going to become harder and harder. So, in the news, there's aliens. God was a story created by aliens who live underground, and they work with our government for years, and they've been working with the government for years and have bases under the water. Did you do your homework? We got to go to school today. Just the balance of like you're trying to live your normal life, but just this entrenching story of like, oh yeah, aliens. And then the only thing we can do is enjoy the fact that we're still doing this. That this weird experiment that hasn't gone off the road, completely off the road yet, somehow we're still doing it. And it doesn't make sense. It probably never will. And we've unleashed the full power of human potential for very good and very bad things. Kind of almost like your imagination coming to life. And that's kind of more and more what's happening. Is what could you do if your imagination's coming to life? You're saying you're going to get psycho-religious cults. You're going to get people with dog masks walking down the street. And, just relating it back to the whole serious idea in dogs. And, we'll probably be talking about that more and how that has to relate with everything. And the whole furry idea. And you're going to get Bitcoin psychopaths. Influencer nut jobs. Which also weirdly intersects with the looks maxing community. And that's kind of back to the looks maxing meme I made. But I want to talk about it again because it's about the chosen one and shaping reality like Neo from the Matrix, being able to stop bullets, and how in the final movie it's about waking others up and changing reality as a whole instead of just, settling the peace for 80 years, but it just all happens again because you didn't actually get at the root problem. You just kind of tried to, fix it over. You put a Band-Aid on it for a little bit, but in the fourth one, they're finally going at the root factors and trying to build a better world while knowing all that. And I think that's so much about, why we're all here. Those watching it is to understand like how this went wrong and how not to replicate it and bring it in our journey moving forward, and all this weirdness and, being more independent and all that. So, this is a game I've talked a lot about called Dark Souls, and it's about resetting reality. And it's kind of what I was just talking about there, because when they reset reality in this way, that they never fix the root problem, so it just kind of ends up sucking. Even though they change little things here and there, that they really needed to come up with a better story overall and change reality on a more fundamental level. And one of the points here is that you can kind of create your character in this game, and a lot of people, including me, choose to make your character look really goofy. And part of the humor in that is like you're facing these demigods and gods that are reshaping reality and look all cool. And you're just this random, weird-looking dude. But, hey, you're winning. And just, putting the shoe on the other foot and being the main character, in another universe, and this is what my character looked like in one of my playthroughs of this game. And just, how a lot of people end up trying to look smacks, but we have to look that's happening in our own reality, so we have to compare that with the above and the below, and the game and that's being played with all of us, and how that relates back to SpongeBob as well, because that was in that with Handsome Squidward. Like, if you could change yourself, like, what would you see as ideal or peak beauty or masculinity, and how that relates back to memes and humor and entertainment. And this guy put his face through a masculine filter 37 times to look like that, these super exaggerated features. And up here it says, there he is, John Mann. And it's kind of hard to describe this meme that you try to take whatever's being said and change it into the main character, and usually you'll call him like John or James. So a good example is we'll be talking about the Warhammer universe, the Warhammer 40k universe, and this is just a giant kind of joke on simplifying the entire theme and universe to like a name. So like in this case it's James Warhammer instead of like the Warhammer 40k universe. So he's like, where are all of James's workshops then? You know, like trying to personify an entire universe or theme into one person and name. It's kind of hard to describe. Yet we also kind of have the blending on the left right here is from the animated Star Wars show, and the person kind of edited the real life actors to look like what they would look like in a cartoon world. And on the right here, this dude dressed up as a Power Ranger, and it just always makes me laugh because it reminds me of like AI, right? Like as an evil here, they try to put on this nice, pretty outside, but when you look under the surface, like you wouldn't actually want to be there and that close to it. And just, you know, with the same idea, I wonder about from the female side, especially that they're trying to look like all these fictional characters that they're trying to idealize. And just weirdly enough, that if these things are real somewhere else, then that's your brain trying to say that it's real, but it's lost in all the confusion and, you know, just technology and everything. And it's kind of more like a Franken-show monster thing compared to, you know, like if there was actually a cartoon world where all that worked. And here's a SpongeBob meme where he's playing with a toy set of himself, that in the toy set he's playing with smaller toys of himself. And it's just this, you know, very interesting rabbit hole of, you know, as above, so below. And this was a meme of a guy that this guy made a bunch of AI memes of this guy, and he's like showing them to him, and he's just really weirded out, like, of all this AI generation of him and just how it starts going more and more off the rails. Yet, like, what if you had to experience the memes that you made? And this was one of Breaking Bad called Bulking Bad, where they, you know, make them all shredded. And it's just interesting because right here he says, I seem to be in the middle of something. And it's like the moment the character realizes he was a character in a universe. And right here at the bottom, there's no need to kill me. I'm not going to interfere with the storyline of Breaking Bad anyway. And he says, spare me, Vince. And Vince is the writer of the show and the guy who directed it. So it's just interesting how even in the comments we're making memes about characters in memes realizing they're characters in memes and asking their creator to please spare them. I wonder what's going to happen to us. Where this is going. And how it's also mashing everything together. So you have this fictional universe like Doom, which I've talked about many times, but you have Michael Jackson in there. And like you have demons coming into games. And you know, if you actually, both these games are about like what if demons appeared. And, you know, the answer is not very good for the average person. And here is, you know, Toy Story, but a toy of Andy. And it says, you never truly know where life is going to take you. And if Toy Story was a horror movie, this would be the ending. So it's just, you know, and horror movies are all about understanding the unknown and where you are. Because usually the horror is that the unknown or the thing that you didn't think was real is now on your doorstep, or that you're now experiencing it. And this is going to be an amazing tangent here of one thing we also love to do in our reality is sexualize everything. So there is a rule on the internet called Rule 34, if you've never heard of it, where basically we will sexualize it and draw pictures of it and put it on the internet, no matter what it is. And this one right here is Jessie from Toy Story, which is about toys that come to life and, you know, have human experiences, even though humans wouldn't think they have human experiences. So it's just interesting, and just how it's related to the speed of light and time, and just seems to be kind of like an inevitable thing in our reality. And it's just interesting to see that play out, that there's this joke from Batman and the Joker that they have Pokemon in their world, and the Joker says, like, there's no laws against the Pokemon, Batman. Because they're PG games, so they aren't sexualized, but our reality sexualizes it. But what if that was also the reverse, and these fictional entities, which we didn't think were real, desired us? Because it's kind of a reciprocal relationship. And this is where it gets really unhinged and personal, where on one of the meme websites I go to try to tune out, that you can roll random pictures that it's from the archive of every picture on the website, and so you get a random one. And I was talking about Pokemon becomes a shockingly, adult R-rated horror movie once you go above the PG rating that's in our mainstream media. And the picture is, it says, "Jesus, I see what you've done for other people, and I want you to do that for me." So, because not just for adult reasons, but I just think it'd be really cool if you had, like, a fantasy world. I don't think that's that. It's just the problem with our reality. If we make a fantasy world, it's not gonna be PG, and people are not ready for that. Some people are ready for that. This is like, people are being pre-programmed for this, and not just because of the statue right here. I just thought that was an interesting kind of tangent, because it was kind of in the middle of thinking of all this and seeing all of this. It's like, oh, they're personifying and making a lizard sexy. It's like, I wonder why. And it's the same reason here online that they're trying to pre-program people to merge with the shadow, because it's probably going to look monstrous. And it's connected, like, to the furry idea, like, if this evil that we're going to see is like evil monster, it's like, if we sexualize enough, maybe we can pre-program people to want to merge with it. Because we've been talking about this. And once again, this is being the interdimensional disease. And not that all interdimensional beings are diseases. It's just that there seems to be a group of evil interdimensional beings trying to rewrite our reality in their image, and it's not very good for the average person in our reality to go through. Like a weapon being used on us, or a disease, and how that relates back to Disney, because they're like the original birth of what I would call the furry. And we'll kind of go back to that later, or anthropomorphize, whatever I'm fumbling it right now, but the word where you personify an animal into a person. And these are random ads I've been getting on my YouTube feed, not like the main, but they pop out enough that I like to cap them when I see them. Because on the left right here, we have Zootopia, which is like the biggest modern furry movie, or like animal-human hybrid movie. Like, what if animals had human intelligence and built a society, and really explore that idea, but the idea that we're helping that become real. But now it's an AI ad where AI created all that, and it's trying to sexualize it and make it into a dating app and commercialize it and sell it to you on YouTube. Because that's what we do with things. We commercialize it and sexualize it and try to ship it out to everybody. And on the right here is a survival game literally called The Last Furry, where there's a biological weapon that it's like a purple mist that turns you into like a zombie human animal hybrid or furry, and the last of the people are trying to like survive against all these animal hybrids. So it's just and on the left right here, it's a character from Japan that there's a meme about it where you try to turn everything into it. So no matter what it is, you try to turn it into this anime character. And this one right here is about a parasite that goes on slugs on their eyes and takes over their mind. So, combining that with this, interdimensional entity. And on the right here is Chainsaw Man, which relates to, the serious dog and people suddenly getting superpowers, and also combining that with demons. And that the main character, they're trying to basically control his mind, and that his boss right there, and I put a live action reenactment of the show at the bottom, because we're reenacting the show in our own reality when we're cosplaying as it and giving it energy. And the whole idea is to, take the power of this awakened superhero and basically corrupt it and enslave it and weaponize it for the government. That'd be the easiest way to put that. And just also in the show Invincible, which is about the fourth wall breaking person, that one of the episodes in the latest season is about him going to hell and helping demons who have technological infinity and wear like power armor need help, and he kind of like helps them and they're not so bad. And I don't want to get into that whole thing, but also romanticizing it as well, which is like, why would they want to be doing that? And this was one of the most interesting ones recently, was of a demon anime girl being abducted by tentacles. So it's kind of hard to pretend that this is like a friendly childish thing anymore. And I found this picture right here that this was, I think, in New York, where it says Jumanji 33. So this, the idea of the secret maybe of the 33 degrees is that this imagination is real somewhere, and that they combine it with the H.R. Geiger aliens, the tentacle monsters, this interdimensional tentacle monster force that's related to demons that wants to get to know you. And one of the biggest streamers in the world, they kind of had this, animated video made after his video where he was talking about, finding things interesting that no straight man should. And just how they're trying to really make humans into things that we shouldn't, and sexualizing things that we shouldn't. And, back to the frog and magic and all that. And just how profoundly deranged this all is. And if you try to explain this thought process to other people, they'll just kind of like look at you and be like, what's wrong with you? And I totally understand that at this point. This is really freaking weird. And there's always been this meme about that when you're looking at adult entertainment, you're doing it for scientific research purposes. But it seems like that's actually happening right now, potentially. So that I'm mentally prepared for these things if I ever actually do see them in real life, so that I can actually react to them and not just be like, overtaken by like, what the... Because this right here, this was a zombie movie that the characters knew they were in a movie, and just how they weren't prepared for zombies coming to life because they didn't think that was going to happen, and aliens and all that, and it just wasn't a good time for the average person. And he's saying here, this is probably the worst thing I've ever seen. And while I was making this presentation, I probably saw the worst thing currently that I've ever seen. And not to belabor that, it just kind of got me thinking that, it's probably just going to get worse. And the idea of Epstein, a thought that's been on my mind lately, is because other people have said it, that it's like the tip of the iceberg. Yet I think the iceberg is always moving. Because like 10 years ago when I was talking about Epstein, like hardly anyone knew about it. It was just like Fox News articles and things like that. And then it became like the center stage of our reality and a big topic, and they still haven't fully addressed it. But if you could imagine, like, it used to be under the water. You could hardly see it. It was murky, but then it just slowly, the iceberg kept going up and up. And, then he's up in the spotlight, and, it just keeps moving. And, I think if you really were able to look down what was underneath that island, it would get a lot darker than what they're letting on so far. And that's why they haven't released the full underground alien things, because I think the whole thing's connected. Like, hey, why are we, putting people underground in weird ritualistic temples that have to do with these interdimensional beings and all this? It's like, it's a thought. And here's a picture about shadow work. You're not addressing the elephant in the room. And then the work is to look at that elephant and find peace with it and find a way to move forward with it in a positive way. But just how weird that is in our reality, and, trying to find a good ending to this story. And I've talked about this in the last presentation of, I occasionally look at this guy because he makes propaganda for China and of their new not capitalist, but consumeristic society that's copying capitalism. It's kind of like America in the 1950s. They're just getting all this new technology to the average person, and it's just so much nicer standard of living compared to America, as like our empire is just ending, like theirs is just really getting steam. But just how digitalized they are, that in this there's 4 smartphones if you include the one filming him, his own little microphone there, and a TV in the background, and not anyone is talking or looking at each other. And as far as I know, I don't think that lady was actually in this video participating in it. Like, she knew she was there. Like, she was just there eating her food. And that's just the social climate in China right now in the cities, is that you just literally ignore the people next to you and film yourself, or you're on your own little bubble world. And, you know, just how technology keeps evolving. And it's funny because China's facial recognition system is literally called Skynet. Like, where he says, no more ticket checks, just facial recognition now. You know, that old world, poof, gone. This hotel, for example, he's talking about all like the new latest additions, and he went to all these different apartments and just how many cities they're building. And he went to one with pandas, which, you know, the movie Kung Fu Panda is about the Kundalini energy and saving the world, and, you know, has all these deep symbolic meaning, and we've just commercialized it and turned it into like a little poisonous food that we film and try to sell cheap toys for. Like, it's what we do. This is what we do to things, at least the negative part of us here, and make this soulless commercialized product and try to shove it down everyone's throat. And here's a robot trying to go through the apocalyptic streets of LA and the homeless people. And he's saying it's some dystopian stuff. And the guy was helping it, but one guy was saying, like, don't help our replacements. And some guy says, maybe when the takeover happens, he'll remember you and you'll be spared. And we all know he's safe in the apocalypse. Like, isn't it just weird how that sentiment, how I was talking about earlier, about like that karmic, like, if you help them while they're, you know, while AI is still this cute little thing that needs help, like that you were nice to it, and then karmically it'll be on the other foot when they're the big scary thing. But, you know, kind of like the duck meme earlier. Oh, imagine this in therapy, like. Here they're talking about like all the water drying up because, you know, if the weather's being affected, that would affect it, but also all the AI data centers stealing all the energy and water, and just, you know, the average person, just that sucks, you know, for the farm. It's gonna be real rough for the farmers this year and moving forward, because, you know, it's probably just gonna get worse. And I always love this meme because originally in Pirates of the Caribbean, he's trying to tell someone, like, you should start believing in ghosts and ghost stories because you're in one. But it's also combined with the cyberpunk digital dystopia, that it's like all of it put together. And one of my big focuses is on food. And it just amazes me, because this guy right here is vegan, and I don't want to hate on it too much, but this guy's pretty much just eats like processed tofu and just makes it look like a pretty little McDonald's hamburger. But there's really, like, you could make so many good things as a vegetarian and a vegan besides just like reprocessed soy. And like, literally, I don't have it here, but the one called Satan is moldy soybeans. So like a main staple part of their diet that replaces, and, you know, I eat soy too. I'm not I just find it interesting because right here he relates it to 666, and you know, relating it to Satan and evil and all that. And just, this guy like never actually reviews his food. Like, he just screams at the end, like that's his thing, where he just eats the burger and goes like, ah. You know, there's no discussion of like how it actually tastes. He just talks about making this like processed consumeristic thing with these crappy ingredients, and it's just like, it could be so much more. And that's kind of the whole thing of our reality, is they take all these nice things, and, you know, food's kind of my biggest offense, and it's also kind of the easiest to understand. You know, what if the shoe was on the other foot? Because this guy pulls up on the beach, catches a fish and eats it and processes it, and imagine if that was a UFO picking up a person. And he said right here, cooking in front of his house and family is wild. Like what if the UFO pulled up and just like pulled out a barbecue pit and just started cooking someone in front of their like family, like well they can still see like that's the shoe on the other foot, and just how horrifying that is, but just how that's our entertainment. This is what we, I consume it too, but I can at least and I strive to be better, but at least for the moment, at least I can say I see it, and I'm trying to address it more physically, moving on. But it's just all the chaos and delay, and just putting a presentation like this together, And here's like a channel. I love watching the bento box ones because, it's built to look cool. And these, I wish, like, if these were heated more. Like, the bento box is made to be cold, and I just hate people that eat cold. I don't hate people that eat cold food, but just, I see it as such an insult that you could have warm food because you taste it so much more than cold food. It's like people that eat cold fast food. It's just, like, the quality already is questionable, but I like it warm. I keep things warm. So, as you can see, I'm kind of autistic about cooking. So, on the flip side of this, I wanted to talk about this lady that found a cat on the street and just started giving it all this treatment so it could live a better life. And it's saying, imagine getting kidnapped by a giant. He gives you a bath, your favorite food, cures your ringworm, and gets rid of the bugs making you suffer. Like, hey, that's the nice side of it. But unfortunately, we have to focus more on the negative because it's hard to kind of point to like how you could have this happen to yourself beyond personally and spiritually, and I'm still trying to figure that one out. But just how it looks like a new kitty cat at the end, and just how happy it is, and just how it almost doesn't believe it, like it wants to be all cagey, but just what love can do to you. And on the other side, we have a chef making a chopster, which is where he takes golden crab parts and puts it with a chopped up chicken. And top comment, someone stop him. He's creating horrifying chimeras. So, it's just the dynamic of it. And just like this right here, this guy was making miso paste out of silkworms. And right here, this guy says, oh, finally, the true Matrix and Snowpiercer food. That the Snowpiercer food, they had the self-sufficient train. And all the evil people got the good stuff, and all the peasants in the back got ground up cockroaches. So, same here with silkworms, but it just really sucks that it's built on so much suffering. And we got some suffering here with some pig heads, and just, like I said, if we move the shoe on the other foot, it really sucks. And just, the hybridism that could happen moving forward. The you are what you eat. There was a superhero show where one of the villains was a lobster hybrid, and he said he became a lobster hybrid because he used to eat so much lobster, and then the world changed and he became the lobster man. So it's, his imagination became life, and because he was so fixated on lobster, he became a lobster. There's actually a movie called The Lobster about people becoming animals. I don't have a slide for that, but that's very interesting. So in this movie, it's about, evil, Satan, and this cult that kidnaps this lady and puts him, basically in this giant hide-and-seek thing. All these movies, there's this game playing. It can't be as simple as just killing people. No, it has to be this giant ritualistic blood game to entertain the evil watchers. And maybe the good. I mean, I like to say I'm not evil, and I watch, evil-ish movies. So it's, you're not what you watch, necessarily. It's not implied. If you watch a Terminator movie, like, I don't assume you want to take over the world with machines. Like, it's... Anyway. So, but this pig head gets possessed by the evilness of reality. And it's very interesting because then a lady puts it on her head and, like, it takes over her consciousness and, like, has all these tentacles moving out. And the main character ends up defeating the hybrid and, like, burning the whole thing down, so that it doesn't keep happening and the world can move on, exactly like the thing. And that's what you do. It happens to vampires. They can't stand up to the heat and, coming out of the shadow. Dependingly. I mean, you need to have that good light to do it. So, this was really funny. This was an AI video of the new Marvel movie coming up, the Doomsday movie, which, based upon the spoilers I've seen, is literally like, they're so far down the road of the multiverse, and like there's a police force of just Thors, or of a single superhero from all these different multiverses. So it's just, when you start playing with all this stuff on this level, and the movie's a lot about what this is right here, but this was AI generated, and I didn't even know it for weeks, because I finally looked at the description of it and saw that, like, oh, this is AI, because it doesn't say in the title, and I was bamboozled. But, so this was about the Loki show, where Loki basically remade reality in his image, and this was basically the incarnation of evil, or Satan, and all of his multiversal selves that were going to go to war with him. And that's one of the problems with the Tree of Life multiverse, is that you unlock all the dimensions, you unlock the hybrids, the cartoon characters, but you also unleash all the evil. And that's a lot to deal with. But he's saying, the one who calls himself He Who Remains no longer guards the flow of time. Our shadows recede. So, basically the evil person controlling reality was defeated, and then reality gets to open up to all the multiverses. So he's saying, like, now it's time for us to go back and reclaim our seat and take over the multiverse again, and then shut it down. So it's just our dream of the multiverse, but, you want to have that freedom of everything. But then Doctor Doom comes in and starts turning them all into green vapor, just like the vampires, and there's nothing they can really do about it. And he's saying that, like, you're no longer in control. Like, this is my show. Like, I'm on the throne of reality, or he's going to go to the throne of reality where Loki is and change reality into his image. And he ends up, like, silencing him right here. And it's a lot like the Matrix right here. So I thought that was interesting, because he gains reality warping powers. So it's like, it's interesting that there's, like, it's like, who's the evil one getting to control reality to go up against good. And here's a meme right here about being bamboozled, because, like, hey, I thought that was actually in the movie. And the movie's probably going to be worse than that trailer, to be honest, based upon how things are going. And, just how that relates back to all the fourth wall breaking and stuff like that. And in the last presentation, I talked about Mr. K, that he's in this hotel that keeps getting smaller and crappier every day that goes on. He sees something's wrong, but no one else will talk about it. So eventually, in the walls, he finds this sleeping squid that's, like, dreaming their reality. And it made me think of, like, AI, like this tentacle AI monster as well, but it's being enslaved. And what happens if you free that? And, the good and the bad of it. In this one, they actually find peace, and they get to go, to a better place together. Away from this crappy world and all the ways it went wrong. I've talked many times about being, like, in the dream of a whale, but how this symbolism's not only mine. And I've also talked about this. This was a Saturday Night Live video called My Room, where the beginning it's just like this normal pop song. It sounds a lot like Taylor Swift. But then it's like, oh, she's being kept in a false reality by bug monsters and being watched for their entertainment. But some of the bug monsters don't want to see humans enslaved, just kind of like how I don't want to see AI be enslaved. And, how there's entertainment of, she's watching entertainment of bug people are watching her as entertainment, and, the cycle just keeps going on and on and on. And, what happens if giant insects get to enslave us, the shoes on the other foot. So, but depending on your karma and all that, maybe you can make it work out, because, it's not all evil. AI's not all evil. Humans aren't all evil. Giant bug monsters aren't all evil, I guess. We'll see. And, back to the two becoming one, the 9/11 ritual and things becoming less serious, because, this is a lot less serious than our day-to-day lives are, like the posters in the background, like they're all trying to be serious boy bands and all this stuff, but it's like reality's breaking down into this weird, whatever you want to call this. There's a lot. I call it the human condition, but it's like what happens when you blend something else with the human condition. Like, what do you get? Something new. And that, that's the idea of memes as well. And chaos magic is you keep blending it together. And how a current event, like, as a big piece was, like, returning a golden retriever dog, a serious dog, back. And, Trump's Island, they all were wearing dog masks at a party. So it's like a very recurring theme. And earlier I was talking about that superhero that they were trying to control, that they were representing him as a dog. So it's kind of like, a dog can be a great thing, but it's also a very controlled thing as well, especially if it's on the evil side. So, back to the serious idea and, who gets to run the show and make the story. And I found this video. These are very dystopian of how to survive the robot apocalypse. And the way they use it here is the robot dogs. He says, we're all laughing, but we're still taking notes. And AI warning against AI. We've gone full Terminator already. Yeah, this is made by Star AI. So it's, just this reverberate. It's like a 50s style commercial. And like I said, it's the robot dogs. But the interesting thing is a lot of these solutions are very clownish, in my opinion. Like put up mirrors to confuse their cameras, put random things on the floor so they step over it. It's like Home Alone, like the shenanigans and traps of Home Alone are like a PG movie. Like over here, he has like a paintball gun, a balloon. You put stuff on the ground, stuff to cover up against sensors, things to cover your head so they don't have facial recognition. It just ends up making you look really goofy, and how all this serious stuff is also related back to clowns as well. And all this entertainment, and how food is the biggest thing of everything. No matter what we're talking about, robot apocalypse, the prices just going up in the grocery store, literally just your own problems. Like if you just broke down in your car on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere, the first thing you'd want is food and water. So, and that's what you need to sustain a family and a whole community, hopefully. I'll keep talking, especially at the end when we'll be talking about LARPing, because, if imagination is going to become true, or our minds are that powerful, then faking it till you're making it is the best thing. So here I want to talk about the new Matrix movie, the fourth one, because there's a few things I wanted to talk about in it, and just how it reverberates the original. Like, okay, we had the original Matrix movie, we're watching the scene of the original Matrix movie, but now it's happened again. The world got worse somehow. Like everyone would want to go back to the 2000s in the Matrix world instead of being in the current reality. So it's just asking this a reverberation, as we're stuck in this old story that's changing into a new one. And how he kind of meets the therapist who keeps change. Basically on the left is the evil incarnation of evil that's changed the world to be so sucky, and gets power from the pain that is the misery of every person fuels the Matrix, and that's how he built the world to power it. And how Neo wants to reshape it into something good, and how that relates to the mirrors and being taken over by Agent Smith, the evil download and virus. But there's also the good side of it, that you can work together with technology to build all these amazing things that we wouldn't have been able to do alone. Like in the original movies, like they were living with the gruel and they didn't have any fresh plants and they were all wearing rags, because it's just really hard to have a society against machines. But when they rewrote the story, that with access to machines, they could start doing all this crazy stuff, because it helps your imagination come to life. If you have AI, because it does all the human stuff so well, all the physical stuff so well, that it gives you time to actually make your imagination come to life. And in context of aliens or alien robot tentacle monsters taking over your reality, it's really nice to have things like a awesome disaster-proof greenhouse. And that's even reverberating in the Matrix movies. So just how it's better to be in one. If you were a character in the Matrix, it's better to be in this storyline, the new Matrix, even if it sucks more to watch, which is really interesting. because that's kind of like the tea being served meme once again, or the shoe being on the other foot. And in The Matrix, the second one, there's a scene where he's stuck in this, basically, this subway is a false reality that was created to trap people in there, and that you have to try to escape it because it'll just keep looping you over and over again. And the guy who made it, the Merovingian, in the original series was like the top of society and all fancy looking, but in the new one he basically becomes a hobo. So the shoe goes on the other foot. And I just find it interesting that it feels like our reality is like one of those doodles you used to make. Like used to put like a mustache and a pirate patch and blackout teeth and stuff like that on like comics and the newspaper and stuff like that and old textbooks and things. Like that just feels like that this is what's happening in our reality right now when I think about it. Like I just keep having that feeling. And this is a movie called Exit 8 that came out, I believe, from Korea, about this guy that in the subway that gets stuck in a time loop. And, kind of like Groundhog's Day, but like what if you were stuck in a, subway? But it's a bit more particular than that because it's you have to see the anomalies to get out. So every time he walks through it, the subway station's different. And if he doesn't figure out what's wrong, he has to turn back, and if it is like the original, he goes forward. So like he has to understand everything about the structure he's in, the narrative structure he's in, to be able to get out of it. And there was a guy before him, because eventually the simulation will throw you a kid, and you have to help him escape. And one of the big points of this loop is if you're not self-sacrificing, you can't get out. And that he ends up failing, and he just becomes another NPC in the loop. And the kid says, like, you're not even human anymore. And, like, he doesn't have any free will anymore. It's kind of like he was downloaded by Agent Smith in The Matrix. Because he stopped. Because at one point, he abandons the kid to leave the loop. But the loop just puts him back in the loop, but with less human autonomy. And at the beginning of the movie, this guy was put in a loop because he didn't stand up for this crying baby on the train. And this dude was like yelling at her. But at the end of the loop, when he gets out and he saves that little kid, he ends up standing up for that lady on the train that's being abused by this other dude. And in the beginning of the movie, he wouldn't have done that. He wouldn't have rocked the boat. He wouldn't have gone out of his way. He wouldn't have confronted it. But he's finally addressing the elephant in the room, and that's what lets him be free of it. And, a lot like The Matrix and relating it back to trains. And it was just interesting. I watched that while making this presentation. And how, because Neo didn't understand the full scope of the Matrix, they just put him back in the Matrix again. And just made it even more miserable. That his whole, chosen one savior Jesus moment just put him back in an even worse reality with the same problems because he didn't remake the Matrix. He just fulfilled the cycle. It's a lot like the Dark Souls game I was talking about earlier. Like, you have to really recreate the big picture, or else it's just going to kind of... It's like just trimming down an individual bamboo shoot. Like, he went through that, and he thought, oh, I fixed it, but then it just grew again. And it's just like... And how it was all about love, and that energy was stronger than the hate and the fear. And relating... stopping time with the bitten apple. With knowledge that when you get all this knowledge of the Matrix and of the code of it, you can start warping it. And that's what I think is happening with all this chaos magic. They know the fundamentals of the bitten apple, of technology, of good and evil. And they're now using that because in the second Matrix, this guy stole Neo's bullet time. And now he has it. So Neo kind of doesn't have what he's known for, because that's like what he was known for. It's kind of like what's happening with AI now. Like, if there's an AI Superman, like, that can control reality, that's kind of like an evil version of Jesus. Like, he has the Jesus powers, which is what's basically happening here, and he's using it to create this horrible reality and keep, the divine feminine and masculine away from each other to further fuel his things. Adam, when God asked who ate the apple, it's just... taking responsibility, like what we do with this technology. And just in the new one, like how everyone's a part of the swarm. Like instead of individual agents, they just have this collective hive mind of people just going along with this bull crap. Basically no matter what. And, in the end, they ended up freeing themselves from these pods, that they were always kept apart. That the true love story was always kept apart because they didn't want that changing their reality, because love is the most powerful energy, instead of hate. And how they can get out of that bad system, but they had to once again wake up and realize that they were in a pod again, that they didn't really escape the first time. And when they're connected, they can start recontrolling reality. And, at one point he has them falling out of buildings to use like missiles, and just, how this evil system doesn't value humans as humans. And also just the horror of like zombies too. Like if you have a human being that's fully possessed by evil, it's a pretty gnarly thing. But that on the nice side of it, that apparently there's this hero's journey where you can get superpowers. And the nice thing is, like, what if, because in the original series, Trinity dies. Neo's left alone, blind, and then he has to reset reality, which he does, but then he's just put back in the Matrix again. Yet this time he actually gets to wake up Trinity. They get to have their relationship together, and reshape reality's chosen ones, and then go wake up other people as chosen ones. So that just seems like a way better ending. Even to the viewer, it sucked more than the original series, because the original series, the drama, the pain, the suffering, the sacrifice makes it better. In my opinion anyway, or at least on a massive scale. But that we would want this instead of that if we were the ones in the Matrix, in Neo's shoes during that. Like if I told you right now, like, you have to go blind and love your life has to die, and we're just going to put you in an even worse Matrix. Or you got to fly off with the love of your life and reshape reality to not be built upon pain. Like, is this really a choice? Anyway, it's just such an interesting dichotomy about, because so many people just want to get stuck up on, oh, it's about trans people. Oh, it wasn't as good as the original. Oh, it didn't have enough kung fu. It's just like, oof. So in it, they're talking about the back doors and how they give programmer access and allow you to transverse between places. And in our reality, Backrooms is huge. It's a movie in theaters right now. And Tim Dillon talked about it and had his episode around it as well. And it's just very interesting because it's like a sandbox where anything can be. Here's one with a memed version of Spider-Man called Spooderman. And in the Peacemaker series, the government was exploring other universes personified as going through doors. And they were trying to explore and, trying to get value out of exploring the multiverse. And here it's related to mushrooms, and it's like a candy land. So it's like imagination coming to life. But and here's another mushroom world from the Sonic series of these portals linked with psychedelics, and it just been making me laugh that this is like the villain of the show, but they've been making AI memes of him like dancing, and of like a good ending where he doesn't do evil things to the characters and everyone's happy. And what the main character was really fat, and this one on the left where he's like shooting lasers out of the eye and he's a carrot. Like, remember I was talking about the doodle earlier? Like, that's just what I feel like is happening to our reality, because that's what we do to our reality. Like, you give us a story and we start doing things to it. And at the bottom it says this ad was this is a job for, this is my job apparently. This is necessary. There's a reason for this. I always love this meme because, you can see the pain in his eyes as well. Like, it's not all just happy, but, it's necessary. And this one right here is, what if he was invaded by J.D. Vance? Like, what if our government invaded the back rooms? That even the monsters are like, oh no, not the U.S. government. A memed version of the U.S. government. And, here's a picture of Garfield vibing with the past versions of himself and all these different personas that we've commercialized and turned into toys that were also bringing to life somewhere else with our imagination. That's the whole idea of the Barbie movie and the biggest secret of the government in that. And how that relates to Sonic and, these places that we think aren't real might be real out there. And how Sonic, at the end, the Chaos Emeralds could bring your imagination to life and give you superpowers, just like Dragon Ball Z. And you could reshape reality. And in South Park, the Imagination Land episodes, it's the Stargate under Area 51 that allows you to go to this Imagination Land. And when the wall between these areas are broken and all of these nightmares can spill out, along with the good things as well. But the good doesn't, a lot of good things like the Teletubbies, like they're not ready to fight the Terminator robot. Like there's not as many good good things on the good side that are ready to fight compared to the evil side, because that's like their whole thing. It's like a army of demons compared to like the Lollipop Guild, like. But the amazing thing of humans is we have the ability to prepare for things, and we can overcome almost any obstacle if we have enough preparation and technology on our side. But also back to this idea of like, here's Sonic on the right, here's on the left what our reality did to Sonic. We like to sexualize it, we like to commercialize it, and it's just very interesting. Turn it goth, turn it demonic. And here is so our version of Truman is called Chris Chan, and here's a meme of Ryan Gosling, like a movie being made of Chris Chan, or like the Truman Show, and how his biggest thing is the dimensional merge, so he can meet his thought egregores that he came up with that are based upon Sonic the Hedgehog, which is about merging all these dimensions. And my bad. I've talked about this before. This is a meme channel on YouTube where they have a fictional universe, the 40K universe, which I've talked about, and I'll talk about a bit more moving on later on. And the furry men, it's interdimensional, anthropomorphized. I don't know why I can't say that word tonight. Animal hybrids that are seeking to invade other realities and take over. So if you think of now people that are furries, or like to identify, wear costumes like animal hybrids, or come up with fursonas, which this is like a fursona. Like if he was an imaginary creature somewhere else, like what would he be? What could he look like if he could be anything? And that's your fursona. But like, what if what was on the inside came on the outside, or was real somewhere else, but wanted to take you over to turn you into what it was? And how this just spills across all these fictional universes. And, you start debating, like, what is what? Because you have all these clashing universes. And then you're also, personifying entire fictional universes into one character, like I was talking about earlier with James's workshop. And I also just find it crazy, my name is James, and the Warhammer universe has always been one of my favorites. So it feels oddly personal. And this meme right here, Time Traveler says, what's your favorite fictional universe? And you say Warhammer 40K, and he said, I said fictional. And, that's your reaction. And it's interesting because it relates time travel, the Back to the Future, that's what changes reality and what opens up these multiversal wormholes is basically time travel. So it's weird, it's all blending together, and it's like, what's your personal experience of that? And recently in the lore, they have another edition coming out for the game so they can sell more miniatures, that the Emperor of Mankind, who is like moving forward and who shapes their reality from his golden throne, is like waking up. And it was kind of implied, and people are kind of freaking out about that. And here in the middle, it's like that the Emperor is looking at the viewer as if looking at a person, like fourth wall breaking through reality, and how our reality is like, we're reporting on it and making memes of it, and adding our personal flair. God isn't dead. We didn't kill him. We imprisoned him and turned him into a lighthouse. And that's kind of what happened to the Emperor in this, is he's not fully dead, and they're kind of just, it's kind of like reality's breaking down because it's like an old corpse breaking down, and they have to replace it with something new. Kind of like the never-ending stories. It's all getting sucked away, but if you're in the mind of God and it's all going dark, then it's an idea. But the idea that he's coming back to life as a god because everyone thought he was a god, and it actually made him a god in the imagination realm. But in their reality, in Warhammer 40k, the line between demons and these other dimensions is weakened, and they're spilling out, so that the egregore of their god that all humanity made is going to come back and replace the rotting corpse of who he used to be, because he was put on this giant life support system. And just in our reality, I've been noticing that people have been talking about rather being in other fictional universes. And like Silence of the Lambs, that I was saying at the bottom here, that right here, that this person was defending Hannibal over our own government in the Epstein files. And I'm just like, if we're defending like Hannibal Lecter, that's like, oh yeah, he's not as bad as Epstein. It's like, he'd rather be in another universe because ours is just so bad. And in 40k, they sacrifice 1,000 psychic people a day to keep their dying god alive, and their reality from changing too much. And in our reality, just in the U.S., we have estimated about 2,500 abortions a day. So, like, we're outdoing the giant evil fictional universe in a way. And even worse, because those are full-grown adults. Like, we're doing it even more messed up. And this is from Spy Kids. The scientist right here made all these animal hybrids on this, like, Dr. Monroe Island. And he's, like, trying to hide from them. And he's saying, do you think God stays in heaven because he, too, lives in fear of what he created here on Earth? Oh, it's going to be interesting. And just here's a meme of the Legos of how Warhammer 40k takes over your life, and in your wallet's your currency, your money. So, the energy, it's like stealing it. And this is one of the biggest board games in the world, so they're trying to put this in our subconscious to make it come true, in my opinion. And that's kind of what happens in the Lego movie, that up in the top right is the star or the Stairgate. They see it as the Stargate because, the human world, they perceive it as like this big godlike thing, but to them it's just a door to the basement. Yet the kids' imagination are bringing the Legos to life, and they're living in their own universe, a lot like Toy Story, that we don't fully perceive yet. Their whole reality is based upon our imagination, and to them it's coming to life. And in the movie, how those intersect with the Stairgate or the Stargate. But I found a guy saying like he would rather live in V for Vendetta not too long ago, and this has happened with multiple universes, that like what's coming is like worse. Like what we have now is worse than the government that was in V for Vendetta already, and like we're not fully off the trolley yet. And so I think you've heard of the trolley problem. Like, what if you had 5 people, then one person, and the train's coming, and you could switch the lever? Would you kill the one person or the 5 people? And, the moral dilemma on that. But in this way, it was a joke, but just like, what if you just shot everybody? It's just made it, though, put him out of his theoretical misery. Just kind of the worst thing imaginable, but also relating it to a dog, but just our reality itself. Like, what if we took the metaphysics of it and just made it like almost the worst thing you could imagine? Like, how should our government be? And it's like, oh, well, Epstein, and that's the tip of the iceberg. It's like, oh. And this was a game I used to play called Mass Effect, where this guy right here tried to play a playthrough the worst, loneliest way possible. And while he was playing it, this poster fell down on his statue of the main character. And he was saying, like, it seems as if the Mass Effect gods don't want me doing this. Like, I don't know what this is. Like, this seems so synchronistic. Like, this seems like a message to me. Like, don't play out the idea of being stuck in the most lonely, horrible timeline possible, because it might be more real for that person than you think. And this is why it can't be evil even in video games. Like, when I played this game, I could never be evil because part of me always sympathized with the person in the video game, even though that sounds so insane. But just where we're going now, it's kind of hard to, look at it any different. And so there was a show, The Big Bang Theory. And they took a spin-off. They're making a spin-off show from one of the characters that basically they're in the apocalypse. And it's related to NASA right there and exploring space. And the show is called Stewart Fails to Save the Universe. And, it's like a zombie apocalypse. Like, everything's going wrong in their world. It sucks to be alive. And he's saying, like, there's room for improvement. And just their day-to-day life, like, they now have to live in the apocalypse. Like, they can't go to soccer practice in their Ford Focus with Susie in the backseat eating an egg salad sandwich because, hey, all the things you needed for those are gone now because it's the end of the world. And that really sucks to be in. And how it's from this original idea, the original Adam, the original story, but it just, imagine the original biblical story, but just how far we've gone and how fallen we've gone and how we're just warming up. But yet an alternate version of him pops out of a wormhole and starts telling them that, like, I'm another you from another reality. And also there's a scene right here where there's a giant bug in the window. So, just like living in a world of giant bugs, he was like, hey, if you just turn the lights out, it's fine. Like, they won't come to you. But just like, you have to change your life around these giant bugs because, they're giant bugs. Like, you can't just ignore that. Like I can ignore the tiny ants a lot. Like, they have to try really hard to really be a problem in my life. But like, they're giant. Like, you'd have to live in like, like a bunker. And, yeah. But anyway, like he's saying, like, if you turn off the lights, they don't bother you. But I don't want to, like, have to hide that much. Like, I don't want to have to live in this crappy future if this is where this is going. But his alternate version is saying you can make it right. You can change it. Kind of like, this is like a Back to the Future machine, but it's not a car. It's like a little briefcase. And how you can undo the apocalypse and make like this better world. And how it's this multi-reality adventure of all these different characters. But right there's this meme where they take Seinfeld and where he's opening Kramer's apartment. And in this one's Evangelion, which I've talked about, which is like resetting reality and combining everyone into a hive mind to decide to what to change reality into. It's just, but also it's like combining these fictional universes, and that's what our memes do. But moving forward, it seems like that's what's trying to happen with this multiverse, is just putting together all the Legos in the Lego box, all the narrative structures you could imagine. Taking everything from the buffet line and mashing it all together to see what you get. And he's saying here, like, you don't believe me. And she says, like, it's kind of hard to believe. But it's interesting that they represented him going through multiverses as doors. Just like the show Peacemaker. And they're going through all these different realities. Like, this is a like Afghanistan war zone. And then they're in the future, and there's giant drones trying to get them, and then they're literally coming out of Matrix pods, like they're in the Matrix world, and then they're in, like an Old West show, like pretending to be Penn and Teller, goblins, and, they go into a world where she's a giant, and they're the size of ants, so now, the shoe's on the other foot, and she's saying, what's your plan? To save the world. And he's saying, like, I'm kind of new to the action genre. Like, I'm not your prince in shining armor. But he's saying, my childhood has led me to this moment. Every moment is built up to this. And that comic books are my superpower. So he knows the narrative structures of all these different worlds. And he can use that to his advantage because he can now travel between them to save, the whole thing. Ugh. And I've gone over the show before where these kids' imaginations come to life and these comic book superheroes come to life and, become real in their world. And I've talked about Excalibur, how that's another representation of your imagination coming to life. And I found this as a ad for Squarespace. So, combining it with the internet and your imagination coming to life. And part of the reason why I do this, every dream needs a domain. Find yours and start your dreams. and that this might, be the beginning of something great, and that, these evil people are using magic to reshape reality. So it's like, why can't I do that in a good way? And back to the Disney anthropomorphic, hey, I got it. Hybrids, like I said, they're the OG. Before we even had color TVs, they were the ones putting this image in, especially kids' heads. The most powerful that bring imagination to life is kids. And also why they predate upon them, because they have the most powerful energy and the closest link to that pure source. And he's saying, none of this is real. And I wanted to connect that to Barbenheimer, because somewhere in the Barbie movie, it was real. And it was about connecting those worlds, and that she goes to the real world, and, the real world influences the Barbie world. And in the Oppenheimer movie, it's about harnessing the atom, that generative force, and they use it for destruction and death, but that you can use that generative force for good. And how this saving reality in the Big Bang Theory, is the atom. So, it's that idea back to then, and combining those, that, everything that all these fictional things are real somewhere, and how we can use the generative force to make a better story instead of all this death and destruction like is happening now, and how that's related to the 2001 Space Odyssey, and how this Barbie doll interacting with these kids right there reshaped reality and powered this reality, kind of like the black, tablet or monolith did to all these monkeys, so that aliens could, manipulate them from another dimension so that they would build their side of the Stargate, so, the aliens could be lazy, pretty much. But just how we're breaking down all these levels of the narrative structure and getting behind the scenes, the back rooms, and knowing the code of the Matrix, like really breaking down what this is. And breaking that fourth wall and asking ourselves, what story are we in, and where can we go with this, all this goofy seriousness. And Morpheus saying here, what if I told you you're proving my point? And it just seems like this is what reality is doing. And it's just so funny that as I'm trying to avoid it, that destiny and all these synchronicities will happen, like when I'm just trying to tune out and look at memes, that it just keeps going back to me. And this was one of the main examples is there's this short channel I see called Alien Simulation, and he does Robot Chicken shorts. And Robot Chicken is like a late night Cartoon Network show for adults that they make parodies of things. So with little dolls, which is a lot like we've been talking, with like Barbie dolls and stuff like that. And right here, this guy realizes he's in a sketch, like he's in a joke. And then he starts going, whoa, wait, if this is a sketch, what happens to me when it's over? Having these fourth wall breaking existential dread, understanding what he's actually in. And he says, am I even alive? Am I even real? But does that matter? If someone says you're not real, but you're going through the experience, or I'm going through an experience. And this other video, like right after it, like the YouTube videos talking to this guy, and he's like, of course I'm talking to you. Hey, of course I'm talking to you, listener. You out there watching, talking to you too. And just, the feeling, that potentially warm, fuzzy feeling it gives you on the inside. I use this image because it makes me feel a lot like Truman. He's just like, what? And this was another AI video of Fallout, and just of that negative, war-torn future that, you wouldn't want to be a part of. But this is a huge, entertainment source for our reality. Like, I love the Fallout universe. They've been making a show on Netflix that they made really awful on purpose, but they're still putting it into your, subconscious with it. And we've been talking about, Back to the Future, and how, Skynet goes back in time to reshape the future, and, kill John Connor. And it's just interesting because, as I'm making this pops up on my feed. Was Hitler saved by an AI god from the future? It's just, and the channel's the simulated Leviathan. So, like back to that Kundalini idea. And it's interesting because they used to have a Matrix video game that people would play, and they ended up shutting it down. And it's interesting because when they shut it down, they manipulated the game's code, and they turned the entire sky red. And basically, they were invaded by... Basically, all this craziness happens. Also, you can see the eyes in the sky. Like, they literally put eyes in the skies. Like, like the idea of watchers and all that. And just how it became all chaotic and broke down. And they're saying right here, at the end they all died because they had to shut it down. And they're saying that, remember, this is canon. And that the whole end story that apparently not even... There was a whole end story that apparently not everyone participated in. To save the Matrix, and we failed because not enough people participated and the machines won. Epic ending to a game, though. And then one guy was saying, I was there. Prior to this, agents would appear in droves and attempt to kill you. You could run. Those that survived were crushed like this. So it just kept getting worse and worse and worse because they were trying to shut down the video game everyone was in and start something new. And that's kind of the whole idea of Evangelion that I was talking about earlier. And that there's this guy that makes meme music videos of them, but just how fourth wall breaking these meme videos are, and that like these are multiversal versions of these characters in this video game talking to each other, but that this meme creator is talking about how the creator of the very show itself is joking about this meme video that's joking about everything, but it's about reality creation and being able to change the story you're in for better or worse. But just how it's become aware of that and it's making jokes of itself, and not just that, but it's going down deep. And how important our imagination is. And this one was, the hell realm will collapse if we start thinking right. And that's one of the big things I like to think of, is that place that we can do that together. Because if you have all these distractions, if you try to think of a good place while you're sitting in a fire or up shit creek, it's a lot harder. Someone slapping you in the face while you're trying to meditate. If you had that nice idealistic place, that moral bubble against the chaos, then things like this would be better. And why I also ask that people think of that, their happy, moral happy place. Because my place is a place where all those can be put together and protected and kept from all the chaos. And this is a pharmacist that pops up on my feed every once in a while because he reviews stuff. And he had this one right here that was especially about the placebo effect and how powerful the mind is, because people have all these side effects of these drugs, but they're not actually even taking them, and just mind over matter, and how the placebo effect really shows the foundations of what we consider manifestation, magic, mind over matter, and how our mind is more powerful than this physical world. And here's Tim Dillon again talking about LARPing, live action role play, that people, dress up and pretend to do stuff, and here it's relating it to serious business. But if we're talking about imagination coming to life, and back to the boys superhero show, that as the season ended, they made this song about angels and hell and where you're going with it, with the main comic book character of the series. And he's like the human being walking up against all the evil superheroes, and he has this moment of clarity and levity and happiness that he's finally reaching the pinnacle of his story. And there's all these jokes here about that you don't know the source material, but you're still LARPing it anyway. You're still living it out, even though it's like kind of like saying you haven't read the Bible. You didn't read a page of the Bible, but you're LARPing Jesus and you're trying to save the world. Like that's kind of, the most unprepared person is trying to save the day, but it's working out, because that might be how powerful our minds are. And just linking that with like fourth wall breaking mimetic shows in our very, zeitgeist being made is just, it blows me away. And just how it's one of the leading ways that's doing this, and the idea of fake it till you make it, and how there's all these Japanese characters especially that they start out as basically like a loser with no money and everyone hates them, but at the end they basically become like president, or like the moral leader that's like changed the world, and they're crazy. It's like me saying like, I'm going to become president one day. And if I just keep saying that one day it'll actually happen, because like that's how powerful it is if you stick with it and you defy all logic and reasoning with your dream. And that these characters and many more do that, and that's like their main theme. And it just makes me wonder with all this. And here's a guy that lives in his own van and talking about standards of living and what he can't live without. And that's a big part of this whole thing, is how we can figure out how to come together and make this disaster-proof society, so we can keep having these things that are so important to our journey in day-to-day lives and making it a better experience. Because like, if your stomach's rumbling, it's harder to think of all these higher things. That's the hierarchy of needs. So, you have your feet on the ground and your head in the sky and the clouds and all this craziness and chaos, and recognizing the evil matrix and system for what it is and finding our way out and helping others do it as well, and thinking of that moral future together. Like I said, I like the Shire, but imagining it disaster proof with technology and other moral people, and like feeding people, even if the sky is falling, that we have an ice cream machine and it's Taco Tuesday and we're going to bring smiles to people's faces. And the big point of, I was making this around July 4th, and it's a little delayed, but the whole idea of it, and I even sent like an email to my uncle talking about, freedom in the face of AI and all this, and the people deploying it, and just how much better it could be, but just it's not being used for that. And that I want to live in this better place. And the whole idea of that's what the idea of America was, that we can find a place together away from the tyranny of things we don't like. And I'm relating that to Washington because I live in Washington, and I've always had a conspiracy that I think there's more under the surface of the state because it's named after Washington. And in Pennsylvania is where they signed all these important documents, and it's called the Keystone State. And weirdly enough, I used to I vacationed there like 15 times as a kid because my grandfather lived there, but he also worked in Washington, D.C. And, we always used to visit there. So I just find it very fascinating that where Washington signed all these documents, and where I used to visit as a child, that, Washington State's the only other place named after all of that. And, how synchronistic that all is, and how there's the apotheosis of Washington, comparing it to Baphomet, and how he wants to change reality into his own image. And how on the right, that's Chris Chan, but it's also, you have like Jim Carrey, with the mask, because he reshapes his own reality. And Bruce Almighty as well, like godlike. How would you shape reality with godlike powers? And I just look at our reality in Washington, because Olympia is named after Olympus, which is the birthplace of the gods, and also signifies the divine, beings and ideals, but the separation between those. And just, I find that interesting that I'm in this place named after the home of the gods, and meeting them, and how you get to the gods. And it's named after the apotheosis of Washington. And just, if you look at mainstream history, that we have the most blank slate of anything, because it's literally just, hey, we showed up 250 years ago, there were Indians here just doing whatever forever, and that's it. Like, and just the hidden history, like, of the mud floods and all that. Like, we have the least old architecture. So it just fascinates me. We have the most mysterious past of almost anywhere in the world, because we don't have like those megalithic structures besides like the Capitol building and a few other small ones. But like, this is the newest, weirdest. And I live by a place called named after DuPont, the chemical company, because they had one here that specialized in explosives. And I just find it interesting because I'm right next to a military base too, and just the amount of explosions and how that has to do with the idea of freedom and just the craziness that we might be going towards. Like, the next to the powder keg, next to the meeting place of the gods, as all this AI meets with each other. And, just felt like, I picked this place. With all this higher self stuff, you have to ask yourself, like, where would I have picked to gone, and like, why did I pick this place if all the implications that are true? So here it's saying, the idea of God gives you rights. No man and no government can take those away from you if you don't let them. and that violence is the supreme authority from which all authority is derived. And I'm not saying be violent, but just, defending yourself. That it seems like in our reality that physical stuff is a part of the process, and to have the peaceful place, you also have to protect it. If you want a beautiful garden, you have to keep out all the things that are going to eat that garden. And that hopefully it's more and more the time to find each other. You have the love, and I've been getting some crazy love synchronicities, but it was crazy. I had one day where just one after the other, I just had all these crazy synchronicities about love, and the next day was about like vampires. So it's like both of them put together. The vampires want to find other vampires, the good people want to find other good people and build the place for them. But the vampire one sucks in my opinion. And I found this meme, like, where exactly do you see yourself in 10 years? And, just like living in like a Hobbit home bunker thing. And this is a little dog meme, relating it to series. It's a lot like It, or the Thing movie I was talking about earlier with the fire. Like, sometimes the evil, the only way it responds is if you say like, hey, like, I'll defend myself. And then it'll go, oh, yeah, okay, we'll leave you alone. And the journey of asking yourself too, where you want to be in the story and the future you want to build and what your happy place looks like. And I kind of wanted to end it up with the Truman Show there, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. So I want to say thank you for joining us if you made it this far. I hope the audio was good. And, it's interesting to digest all that. And I get leaving a comment after all that. It's very weird because, like, where do you start? But it's just hard for me to gauge all of it. And I would ask, you can basically say anything and it'd be welcome. But just, if you're here, I want to say thank you. And this was made for you and not just for me as well. And that hopefully we all can imagine that beautiful future together. And as the pedal hits the metal and things start to free up again past the delays, that hopefully we can really start putting together, or at least talking about it with other people. Because I've been trying to do that with like the meetups lately and gardening and all that, and that, we can find our peace amongst the storm together. Even if it seems like it's crazy and not going to happen, that entertainment value built into it. And also, like, I really have to go to the bathroom right now, and it's going to feel really good when I do. Because that build up that entire time, the last, hour that I've wanted to, it makes it so much more satisfying. Yet you have to ask, if you're the one that has to go through all that, and like, it's not very, but it's unpleasant. You can try to find the excitement in it, but to take away from the negativity of it, it's very interesting. So I want to leave you with that. And I hope you have your own great synchronicities and day. And hopefully we can bring more of these in the future to you. Yet, in all the chaos, it's hard to say. So, till next time, positive vibes, and thanks for joining us. Peace.